Hello friends and welcome back to the Dork Side. I'm the Dork on the road and this is my long-awaited 6-month review of the Yamaha Tenere 700. I'm just going to say it right at the beginning. The Tenere 700 is without peer. It is a truly unique motorcycle and there is nothing like it in the world of motorcycling. We keep waiting for something to come along that will compete with it or be similar, and it just doesn't exist. And because of that, it is quite possibly the best value in all of motorcycling. So I've had this Yamaha Tenere 700 for 6 months. Some of you know I got this bike and my Norden 901 at the same time. I've been riding both and trying to put miles on both. I've taken it on a weekend training course. I've taken it moto camping, taken it all over the place, ridden it in the cold, the wet, the rain, whatever, and tried to spend some time getting to know this bike and really answer the question, is it as good as everyone thinks it is, as everyone says it is? Much excitement is out there about the design of this bike. These bikes are super hard to find, so the question is, does the rarity of these motorcycles and the difficulty of getting your hands on them, has that inflated their value beyond the actual value, the actual capacity, the actual capability of the motorcycle? My goal is to give you an idea of what it's like to own and ride one of these bikes. I am not the super in-depth every single stat and statistic guy. Lots of other reviewers out there doing that, including my friend Ian at Big Rock Moto. This is more about the experience of owning and riding this bike, and does it live up to the hype? Let's talk about the pros and cons of the bike, and then we'll talk about my final conclusion, how I really feel about what it's like to own and ride a Yamaha Tenere 700. So the list of pros for this motorcycle, the advantages, the great things about it is very long. First and foremost, this Yamaha CP2 engine, the engine from the FZ07, is statistically one of the most reliable engines of all time. Ownership experience, both of myself and the people who have owned these bikes for a couple years, and in particular our friends at Ride Adventures who maintain a rental fleet of these bikes that have thousands and thousands and thousands of miles on them. All of those experiences have gone to prove that it is an incredibly reliable motorcycle. The guys at Ride told me those bikes get ridden more than any other bike, not because they're chosen the most, although that is a factor, but because they're never in the shop, and a lot of the other bikes are. It's hard to beat the reliability of this engine and this motorcycle, and if that's something you're after, there's very few other motorcycles out there with this level of capability that offer the same level of reliability. So Yamaha's knocked it out of the park in that area, and for some people that's the most important thing, and if it is, you would do well to get yourself a Tenere 700. It's a simple bike. It is a no-frills motorcycle. It is a motorcycle, a whole motorcycle, and nothing but a motorcycle. I mentioned I have a Norden 901, right? It's a bike with similar capability and built for similar things, but it is loaded with frills, like a bunch of ride modes and TFT dash, and it's got a mode you can customize on the fly. It's got cruise control. It has all these bells and whistles. The Tenere has none of those things. So if you don't want that stuff, if you feel like that stuff gets in the way of purely enjoying the experience of riding and owning a motorcycle, or you're someone who worries that those things are just additional things that can break and fail, then the Tenere 700 is a great choice because it is dead simple. The one piece of technology it has is ABS. It can either be on or off, and that is both wheels front and back. No off-road ABS, no ride modes, no nothing, no traction control. You are in control of this motorcycle 100% of the time, and for some people, that is an amazing thing, and for others, it can be scary. I think it's a pro if you're looking for that, but if you're looking for a bike with a tons of frills, bells, and whistles that does a lot of the work for you, the Tenere 700 is not it. Power delivery of this CP2 engine is linear, smooth, and predictable. It has a ton of torque. You can feather the clutch for days in second gear. It's very easy on this bike to go up a gear, keep the revs up, and use that clutch control in and out to get through, over, and around technical stuff, rocky stuff. It's very confidence-inspiring at slow speeds, and you know that even if you screw up and don't have enough momentum, the engine is going to bail you out because it has a lot of torque when you need it. It's powerful, easy to control, fun, responsive. This is a bike that I would say is quick. It's not a bike I would say is fast. So the Norden is fast, but the Norden has 100 horsepower. The Norden has snap your neck back, piss your pants power. This is a quick bike that can go fast, but it definitely accelerates well down low. It's easy to get the front wheel up if that's what you're into. It really hits a sweet spot in terms of power and capability that's manageable off-road but useful on the highway. It has a fully adjustable suspension. That is really hard to find on motorcycles that cost this much, except there's no preload on the front, but everything else, compression, rebound, is adjustable. It's also a good suspension. It's very progressive. The small bumps get soaked up very easily, but the hard bumps, I have not bottomed this bike out at all, and I am a heavy rider who is prone to doing dumb things like going off of jumps from time to time. My Norden I've bottomed a bunch of times, lots of times. This bike has never once hit the stoppers, no matter what dumb stuff I was doing on it, so I feel like it's a really good suspension. It's almost too good in some cases. I had to turn it down when we were on the road up to the Taiyi Lookout on the Touratech ride. It was bouncing me around too much because it was too responsive. So tweaking it and getting it set can take a little work, but once you get there, you're gonna find it's a very, very nice stock suspension, very good stock suspension. This bike makes me a better rider because I have to be. So I talked in my Norden review about how the Norden does a lot of work for me, and so it makes me a better rider because it takes my skills and enhances them, or really what it does is it smooths out my mistakes. This bike makes me a better rider because I have to learn and practice my skills. To get the most out of it, I have to really, really get good, son, at all of the skills. Like traction control, there isn't any. So I have to use my clutch control to keep that back wheel from spinning, right? Whereas I don't have to do that on a bike that's a little bit more advanced, that costs more money. So that's a good and a bad thing. If you want that stuff, if you don't want to have to learn and master those skills, if you want a bike that does some of the work for you, this isn't it. But if you want a bike that's going to continually push you to become a better rider and force you to improve your skills, encourage you, guide you along the way. And that's not to say that it's hard to ride. It's not hard to ride, but there's so much room to improve and grow and become an even better rider on this bike. It's really impressive that way. And so it makes me a better rider by forcing me to improve my skills and encouraging me to do so. When I test rode the Aprilia Touareg, I got on and started messing with all the settings and looking at the ride modes, and I could not figure out how to get it into street mode and then into off-road mode. That's all I really wanted. So it was a complicated bike that takes some time to learn. There's a lot of menus and a lot of sub-menus. Kind of the same with my Norden, just because, you know, you're limited with a basically direction switch and an enter button. It can take a minute to get it set up. It can take a minute to learn. There's a learning curve, finding where all those settings are and all the stuff is. Not this bike, man. You turn the key, push the button, and go. You don't need to adjust any settings. There's no ride modes. There's nothing to figure out or learn. Another thing I really like about this bike that I just don't see, particularly in bikes at this price range, one of my complaints about the Transalp, if you saw that video, is that this bike is clearly purpose-built for off-road riding. This is not a street bike that can go off-road. This is a bike that was designed to perform off-road, and it's okay on the street. It's capable on the street. It's comfortable enough on the street. Me as a rider, that's what I want. I don't want a street bike that can go off-road. I want an off-road bike that's okay on the street. And a perfect example of what I'm talking about is that anti-squat technology. The way that they've angled the chain and the swing arm so that when you give it gas, instead of the rear end squatting and the front end lightening, it actually drives that front end back into the ground without letting the rear end squat. I'm not gonna explain the whole thing. Fort9 has a great video explaining how that works, but that's purposeful design to create a better off-road riding experience, to give you more traction in the places where you need it the most. And I love that about this bike, and I just don't see that incomparably priced. You guys are gonna come in with like, well, the 890, sure, but it costs 50% more. Like, this is a $10,000, now closer to $11,000 motorcycle. There is nothing like it. There is no adventure bike that is purposefully designed for off-road riding and as comfortable and capable as this motorcycle, in my opinion. The other thing is, man, this bike will do anything. You want to ride from South America to Alaska? You can do it. You want to take all the bags off and hit up some single track? You can do that. You want to commute on it daily? You want to ride back and forth to work? It gets great gas mileage. It's incredibly reliable, and it will get you there comfortably every single day. Do you want to rip it on an MX track? Well, you can do that. Do you want to jump 20 feet out of a rock quarry? I've seen video of that. It can do that. This bike will always be more capable than I am as a rider. I will never find the limits of this motorcycle. I've seen plenty of footage of people riding this thing in Moab. The Poltares stuff is ridiculously insane, but even above average riders can get incredible performance out of this motorcycle because it's just that good. And my favorite good thing about this bike is it is just so fun. It's just a big ass smile on my face every time I ride it. It has the most amazing, beautiful stock exhaust note I've ever heard of any motorcycle. I just love the sound of it. I'll start it up in my garage just to listen to it. That is just the soundtrack of your adventures, and it is so amazing. Aesthetically pleasing, it's a beautiful motorcycle. It sounds good, right? It's a feast for the senses. It feels good. It's an amazing bike. Yamaha really knocked it out of the park with this one, in my opinion. It's a great bike. It's so confidence inspiring, wink. I find myself doing dual sport stuff on this bike. I forget that I'm riding an adventure bike because once you're rolling, it feels like a dual sport. It feels like my DRZ or my 450L. It reminds me of those bikes, and I just catch myself doing stuff like, I can hit that trail. Let me goose it off this jump or whatever. Let's go through that sandy. And it's just not stuff I've ever done on an adventure bike or wanted to do on an adventure bike. No bike is perfect. The Tenere 700 is no exception. So let's talk about some of the cons. Let's talk about some of the disadvantages. The first and most obvious one is that when you sit on this bike, the stock seat is unbearable. I said it's an adventure bike that feels like a dual sport, and it really, really does in the seat. Because it doesn't even look that bad. It's reasonably wide, but it is so hard. and uncomfortable, and I'm so glad. This seat concept seat is what I would call maybe an essential upgrade to this bike, because again, it's back to that purpose built for off-road and okay on the road. Same thing, like it's definitely like a dirt bike style seat where it's better than no seat, but barely. It's not what you want for hours and hours on the highway or the freeway on a big long adventure. So I really like this one-piece seat concept seat, and I would recommend you just budget that in if you're thinking about buying one of these, or find one that already has it. Probably my least favorite thing about this bike, and the thing that keeps me from riding it more, or has kept me from riding it more, is it's really loud. And yes, that is a function of the tires. It is tire noise is what I'm talking about. The tires are very loud. You're like, we'll just buy different tires. And yeah, but for some reason, I have the exact same tire setup on my Norden. Tusk D Sport front, and this is the Moto Z Tractionator Rals rear. And on this bike at 65, 70 miles an hour, it's so loud it gives me a headache even with earplugs in. On my Norden, not at all. I don't know if it's the Norden's heavier. I don't know if it's like some kind of acoustic problem with the bike, the way it bounces off. I don't know, but for some reason, tires are just way louder on this bike. Small consideration, I didn't buy it to ride it on the highway, but it is something to be aware of. For some reason, at least this tire setup is so much louder than my other bike, and I have no idea why, and it's super annoying. Some of the things that I said are advantages are also disadvantages, depending on who you ask. No cruise control, that's annoying. It doesn't have modes, so if you want those sort of modes, if you want a little extra security blanket, a little extra cheat code, you're not getting that with this bike. You have to ride this motorcycle 100% of the time. It demands all of your attention and ability, and if you're not into that, or you want modes, or you want the convenience of that, or you're just a gadget whore like me, I just like playing with electronics, doesn't have any of that stuff. It's a very simple bike. The ABS control is simple, it's on or off, and it's pretty street biased, so your rear tire is basically useless if you forget to turn it off. And there's no way to just turn off the rear. I'd like to turn off the rear and leave the front on. Can't do that. It's all on or all off. So like I said, dead simple, no electronics. That's one example of something you don't have with this bike that you have with other bikes, even comparably priced bikes. One of the biggest complaints you hear from people is that this bike is tall and top heavy, both of which are true. The gas tank is up on top of an already very tall motor. That's a consequence of the design choices. That's a consequence of the angled swing arm, which is how you get the anti-squat. It's a consequence of the ground clearance of this motorcycle. And so yes, it's a little tall and top heavy. And yes, if you're thinking about it, you'll notice it when it starts to tip. But do I get on this bike and go, man, this is so much more top heavy than my other bikes? No. Do I think about it when I'm riding? No. It might make me slightly more likely to drop it. Sure. It makes a tank bag fit kind of funny. But is that a deal breaker? No. It's a result of people trying to nitpick and find negative things about a pretty damn good bike, and I'm doing the same thing right now. It is taller and more top heavy, but not in a way that would keep me from buying or riding it in any significant way, and it shouldn't dissuade you either. I don't really like the dash. It's almost too simple for me. It's a single color LCD. If it's dusty, it's impossible to read. No color whatsoever. Like, I would at least like maybe some red. I don't know where the red line is. Like, and that's something you can easily add to a dash like this. Sometimes it's too simple. I would like it to be a little bit less simple, and honestly, Yamaha has acknowledged that because the 2023 has a nicer LCD dash that's going to be a little bit easier to read. Tires are tubed. I wish they weren't on an adventure bike that I'm taking all over the place. It sure would be nice to be able to just patch a tire and not have to take it all the way off and replace a tube or patch a tube. But at $10,300, what do you expect? One design flaw or one curious quirk of the design is, despite these frame rails that you can see running down, the engine is still a stressed member. It's not the best design for, especially for the types of hard off-road riding these bikes are going to see. Obviously, nobody's had problems with that yet. It hasn't been an issue, but it still would be nice to have a frame running underneath the engine. It does run kind of parallel to it, and you get a good skid plate, and there's lots of options out there. And of course, the biggest con, the elephant in the room, or not in the room, as it were, is that these bikes are impossible to find. You just cannot get one. Yamaha screwed the pooch on production. It was the biggest, most popular, most hyped bike people were most excited for, and then they couldn't deliver on them. And it really soured people on it. So some people have given up on finding them. I had given up on finding one, even though it was my unicorn bike that I knew that I wanted really badly, and one just fell into my lap because I'm lucky and have a relationship with a local dealership. They're super hard to find. Pro tip, if you're looking though, the Tenere 700 group on Facebook, people are always posting them for sale in there. That's the place to go. So those are pros and cons of the bike. Great. What's the conclusion? There's no better value in motorcycling, not just off-road motorcycling, but motorcycling in general, in my opinion, because this bike literally does everything. You know, it's your highway tour if you want it to be. Yes, there are other bikes that are more comfortable. Sure, a Goldwing is a better highway tour, but it can't do what this bike can do off-road. And vice versa, there are more capable off-road bikes, although barely. My 450L is more capable off-road, but I wouldn't want to ride it as long on the highway as I would this one. It is incredibly capable. It does all the things, and it's only $10,300, I think $10,500 next year. To get a bike that's as capable as this motorcycle, you have to spend more money. There's There's nothing even close to it. It is without peer. The next closest bike, in my opinion, is the Aprilia Touareg, and I've ridden it and they feel similar. That bike is $2,000 more. And then if you want to get close to the same level of performance, you got to go up to an 890, which is what, 14,000. A Norden is 14,000. There is nothing in the $10,000 range like this bike. Some of you will post motorcycles in the comments disagreeing with me. That's fine. Let's talk about it. But in my opinion, the value for your dollar with this bike is insane. And you've got money left over to buy all the parts, accessories, luggage, and everything else that you want to make it your own. You know, the 890, the Tiger 900, the Desert X, those bikes are just as capable or maybe slightly more capable, but they cost 30, 40, 50% more. And you're paying for frills, you're paying for bells and whistles. If you don't want bells and whistles, if you want just a pure motorcycle, this is it. There's nothing else like it. Not as capable. This is a very capable off-road bike. There's a million videos on the internet to prove it, and I'm not talking about my riding. I'm talking about really good riders squeezing every ounce of amazing performance out of this bike. There are other motorcycles that cost a similar amount of money, other cheaper ADV bikes, but we're talking about the Strom 650, the 390 Adventure, the 750 GS. None of them are as capable as this bike. The Tenere is the total package. It's an adventure bike that you forget is an adventure bike. It feels like a dual sport bike, but when you get on the road, it's perfectly capable and comfortable except for the seat, which you need to replace. And dare I say it, it's even fun to ride on the road. It is a capable, fun, playful street bike, in addition to being an amazingly capable off-road bike. It is truly a unicorn. It is a one-of-a-kind bike, and it is without peer in the world of motorcycling, and its biggest flaw is that it's about as easy to find as a unicorn. Hopefully that changes. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Tenere? Do you own a Tenere? What's been your experience with the Tenere? Please leave that stuff in the comments. It's always great to hear from other owners and to get a lot of perspective and conversation going on in the comments. Thank you for being patient as I put this review together. It's been my pleasure to own and ride this bike, and you know, who knows, it may be around for a while. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.
Excellent!